All right, welcome back. Last video we talked about how to build your backend service quickly. And the key takeaway for that and how to be able to develop your backend services quickly is to solidify and confirm what your system design is going to look like. First things first. From there, the next thing is to be able to create that repository for your backend. And when you're creating it, you want to go with the concept or the framework of MVC. Now for MVC, what we focused on rather than model, view, and control is we focused on the model, the repositories, and the handler or the controller. Okay, that looks terrible. Let me just put these in. I'm not a doctor, but my handwriting looks like I am. So we focus on the model, the repositories, I'm gonna just put repo, and the controller, or the handler. We threw those two different terms around because I'm building Golang. Now, the main takeaway from the last video was you want to focus on one domain per day, and one domain should be primarily built within that single day for the model, the repo, and the controller. And now we could talk about Swagger and why you want to use Swagger and how it can save you down the road big time. Before breaking down what Swagger is and how it can save you down the road and why you want to use it for your startup, if you're building one or if you're just somebody who's curious about tech, let me give you a quick story. So for my previous startup, I didn't use Swagger. So what I actually did is whenever I was done developing the dozens of APIs that I introduced, what I actually did was I copied, this is actually crazy to think about, I copied nearly 30 different APIs, 30 different endpoints from my code over to something called Insomnia. And if you guys are not familiar, Insomnia is basically Postman, right? I know a lot of people know Postman rather than Insomnia. So I'm just going to say Postman moving forward since we are more familiar with this than Insomnia. So what I did is within my repository, my backend repository, that had 30 plus APIs and endpoints, I copied each and every one of those over to Postman, meaning the method, the endpoint, the payload, moved all of those over to Postman. That took days, if not a week and a half. And the reason why it took so long is because I had to group each one of these APIs into that specific domain. This was time consuming. This took away, let me draw a clock. This is supposed to be a clock. This took away from me testing the API. Yes, I was testing it in Postman, but I could have tested it directly on Swagger instead. So Postman is great and everything. I think it's cool if you want to be able to have your business, your CEO, your product people be able to play around and test the APIs. But for engineers specifically, you don't necessarily need to use Postman. Maybe the front-end team would need to use it, but even the front-end team can use Swagger. Postman is, I think, more used on the business side rather than the technical side. Swagger gets the job done, and it gets it done in a fraction of the time. So let's talk about what Swagger is for those that might not know. And the reason why I brought up MVC earlier in this video is because we're going to have to focus on the C part, the controller part, or for those that are Golang developers like myself, the handler part. And the reason why we have to focus on this is because within the controller of each and every one of your domains, each and every one of your APIs, we define Swagger. So on top of each one of your controllers, for instance, you might have a controller called Git. Let's say we're building a to-do app, right? You have a controller called Git to-do, where you take the ID of that to-do item. You might have another control called update to-do, where you get the ID of that to-do and you update it. but it also comes with the payload, because you need a payload to be able to know what to update against that to-do. And you might have another control called delete to-do, which takes in the ID of the to-do you want to delete. Why am I saying all of this? And how does this work with Swagger? Because rather than you having to copy and paste, CP, copy and paste, rather than you having to copy and paste your endpoints and your payloads over to Postman or Insomnia to test it out, Swagger allows you to define something called a JS doc, or a code doc directly within your repository. And what that looks like is within the get to do, the update to do, that delete to do controller. On top of it, you add comments. And the comments that you're adding is basically defining what the endpoint is going to be, defining what the payload is going to be, and giving the response object to the controller. These three things, endpoint, payload, response object, is exactly what you would expect to see if you were to go directly with Postman. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive a little bit more deep into that, because I know it might be a little bit confusing. What you do with Swagger is you import, because this is a third-party application, right? You can go to swagger.com, you'll see it. It's a third-party application. You want to import Swagger into your repository. And after you import Swagger into your repository, to be able to leverage Swagger, be able to leverage live data APIs for you to test and not have to move with a Postman to test it, it's super simple. It's so simple that it's kind of confusing. That after you import it, all you do is add comments on top of your controller, defining things like the domain, the endpoint that you're going to use, what the payload is going to be, as well as the response. And I should also include the method for the API. And by defining all of that on top of your controller, it allows you to be able to, once you spin up your server again, have all of that information directly on a new website, swagger.html or swagger index.html. Okay, I'm gonna explain one more time, but this time I'm gonna focus on a specific controller. So here we have a get to do controller. Okay, we have a get to do controller. After we imported Swagger, we're defining on the comment section what the method is going to be. So a get method. We're defining what the API is going to be, or the API endpoint. Okay. API, passing the ID to do. This is the path, the endpoint for your service. And then we're also giving it the response object. This is literally all that's happening with Swagger. You import it and you define these things within the comment section above your controller. It's that simple. And just by doing these three things or four things, importing and then defining these metadata on top of your controller, whenever you spin up your local server again, you get to have a website to visit where you get to basically test and play around with your APIs. This would be a great time for me to like show you my screen and show you exactly what I mean, but I'm not doing that because just like you guys who's building startups, I'm building my own. And I really don't have time to go deep into that. I would love to, just for the sake of the community, but you know what it is. You got to focus on what you need to focus on. But I think the whiteboard helps quite a bit, even though I have terrible handwriting. Once again, Swagger allows you to test your APIs immediately, in real time, versus you having to take those API metadata, like API method, endpoint, and the payload into Postman in order to test it out. With Swagger, you import into your backend repository. You add comments on top of your controller. Those comments are metadata that's necessary for you to be able to define what the API looks like. So that would include the method, That would include the payload. That would include the response. That would include the query or the params that you would expect to have for that method or that controller. And then when you spin up your server again, based off the comments you defined, you're able to play directly with your API and access the database. Listen, that video that we just did right here, hopefully it's helpful. But for those that have any experience with Swagger, please add your comments to the comment section. Those who have experience with MVC, please add your comments down below. Those that might be confused, please let me know, because like I said, I'm trying to improve my explanation on these type of terms and terminologies and concepts. But I'm trying to do it in a reasonable time where I get to give you guys valuable information, but go back to building my startup. But hopefully this was helpful. Add your comments down below so I can be able to understand what needs to be improved, as well as understand what concepts I might have got mistaken, or if I hit it right on the nail on the head. Let me know too. That's always better. With that being said, make sure to hit the like and subscribe. Peace.